We're glad you could join us on Wellness Talk Radio. I'm Kris Costello. Today we're going to be talking with Gail Sheehy, author of 17 books and author of the best-selling book Passages. And now you've got a very exciting project, which I was very honored to be a part of, called the Daring Project. And I'd love, Gail, if you could explain a little bit about what that is all about.
Sure. Well, it's delightful to be with you, and I'm so happy that I've had your story on my website. So this is a nice exchange. Having written 17 books, finally entering my 70s, and having written about so many other people's passages, men and women, probably thousands of men and women, and their life stages and the passages between them, I finally decided it was time to turn the lens on my own passages. How did I do? What was it like growing up as a girl journalist in the 60s, early 60s, when you were closeted in the women's department if you got onto a newspaper at all? And through my finding a mentor and joining New York Magazine just as it was debuting as the first city magazine in the country, practicing the new journalism, which was a whole different form of writing journalism, being part of the family of most exciting young new journalists who then were Gloria Steinem and Tom Wolfe and so many others who broke through the usual who, what, when, where, why newspaper form. And we adopted the techniques of fiction to use dialogue, characterization, scene setting, and total immersion in our subject, often saturating ourselves in the subject or in the milieu that we wanted to write about so that we would have a personal experience to relate. So that became a large part of my career, and I then moved on from journalism into writing books. And so when I finished writing my memoir after 3 years of excavating, which is really the only term I can describe, because it's like pulling your ribs apart and pulling out the stuffing in between and looking for the magic stones that will reveal to you what was going on at a different stage, how you felt about it, why you acted the way you did, would you do it differently today. And when I got finished, I actually for the first time saw the theme of my life. We don't really stop and think about the theme or the repetitive ways that we react to the things that happen to us. But the theme of my life was daring. Daring to take chances, to jump in to do something I'd never done before, daring to try a different kind of journalism, daring to break a little hole in the glass ceiling for women in journalism in the 60s, and daring to take on assignments or to come up with assignments that I really had no business doing, including my first political story, which was a story about Robert Kennedy. And I had no reason to think that I knew how to write a political story, but the editor of New York Magazine came knocking on my door the night of the launch of New York Magazine and said, "What do you know about politics?" And I said, "Well, my mother's a naturally born bomb-throwing Irish Republican bomb thrower, and my father's a country club Republican. So what I know about politics is it's about fighting at the dinner table." And Clay Felker, who later became my mentor and much later my husband, said, "Great, then you'll understand Bobby." "Bobby who?" I said, "Bobby Kennedy. He's running against G. McCarthy for president, and I want you to go out to California and cover his campaign there." And I said, "But I've never written a political story." He said, "Well, now's the time to start. I need you to leave in 2 days." Well, it's at that point that you are confronted with this thing. Do I dare to take this leap and, land on my face in a pile of humiliation because I don't know what I'm doing? Or until I just take the chance, and if I fail, then next time maybe I'll know how to do it better. And that was one of the first times that I took that leap, and I did work through my fear, and I had an amazing experience that was historic, really, because I was traveling with Bobby Kennedy while he was preaching gun control to very hostile audiences in rural communities in Oregon, with men guns hanging off their shoulders, and I swear they had raccoons or possums on their shoulders. Very angry, but he managed to get them to listen to what he had to say, and he seemed fearless about it. So I was able to ask him about that. He actually invited me to sit next to him on a campaign plane because none of the senior reporters wanted to go. It was terrible weather and raining, and a small craft, and bouncing up and down the mountains over the Cascades in Oregon. And all of a sudden, as we were coming in for a landing to Portland, we couldn't see it because the rain obscured the windows, but another craft was heading straight at us. And all of a sudden, our little craft dropped like a stone. And in the middle of the drop, with men screaming and my stomach turning over, Robert Kennedy quipped, "I knew Gene McCarthy was desperate. I didn't know he was that desperate." I couldn't believe it. He had the equanimity to make a joke in the middle of what could have been a death experience. But that gave me the insight to write about him as a man who had seen so much death in his family as a Kennedy, lost 2 brothers and a number of other members of the family, and violently, that he was not afraid. He was a total fatalist. And the very next night after my interview, his own life was ended at the point of a gun. So that was my baptism into writing political journalism, and I was hooked. So I developed a habit of when I feared, and I'm a normally fearful person. I've even had a couple of panic attacks. So when I fear doing something, that's when I grit my teeth and make myself jump off the edge of the swimming pool like I used to do when I was a swimming competitor and dive in. And even though I don't necessarily, finish the race or succeed, I'm more confident about trying it the next time because I got my feet wet and I didn't die from it. And so when I fear, I dare. And once I realized that that was the theme of my life, I thought, well, daring is a very interesting theme to explore, particularly among women. And so I'm going to, as an outgrowth of my book, set up a website called Sheehy Daring Project and invite women of all ages to send in their daring stories. Famous women like Gloria Steinem, who was a colleague of mine, Arianna Huffington, who was a friend of mine, and what was their daring moment early in their career that helped catapult them ahead. And then everyday women who are even more interesting, and what have been their daring moments? When did they say, this is not the right direction for my life. I'm going to have to quit this career. I'm going to have to live with the fact that I made an investment in it and it's not going to pay off because it's not right for me. And I'm going to try something completely different. Or I've been living with somebody that is toxic to me, and after many years I've just decided that I'm going to have to go out on my own, make my own living, and start my life over, and maybe you're 50 years old. And so many women have written to me stories about that. And then what happened, how exciting and daring adventures opened up once they let themselves out of a cage.
And Gail, it's interesting that you included everyday women in the Daring Project. What brought you to that decision to include everybody?
Well, my whole motivation was to inspire other women to be more daring, to take chances, to value themselves as opposed to, thinking they weren't adequate. And so they may want to read about a Gloria Steinem or a Kirsten Gillibrand or an Arianna Huffington or Lena Dunham and, very highly accomplished and celebrities. But they can't really relate to them. So, because whatever reasons that they got to where they got to is so far beyond the reach of most everyday women that it's not very instructive. It's interesting, but it's not going to really help them. So I wanted women who had actually led reasonably relatable lives, although many did become successful as a result of taking chances. And those are the most interesting, those are the more popular stories on my website.
Well, thank you.